Number 9. The water fuel cell. In 1985, Stanley Meyer created a technical design of a perpetual motion machine he called the water fuel cell. He claimed that an automobile retrofitted with the device could use water as fuel instead of gasoline. The fuel cell split water into its component elements, hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen gas was then burned to generate energy, a process that reconstituted the water molecules. According to Stanley, the device required less energy to perform electrolysis than the minimum energy requirement predicted or measured by conventional science. In a news report on an Ohio TV station, Stanley demonstrated a dune buggy he claimed was powered by his device. He estimated that only 83 liters of water were required to travel from Los Angeles to New York. Furthermore, he claimed to have replaced the spark plugs with injectors that introduced a hydrogen-oxygen mixture into the engine cylinders. According to Stanley, he declined a $1 billion offer from an oil company to basically shelf his idea. He had patents on his invention and was ready for production. However, in 1996, he was sued by 2 investors who he had sold dealerships. His device was examined by 3 experts in court who found that there was nothing revolutionary about the cell at all, and that it was simply using conventional electrolysis. The court found Stanley had committed gross and egregious fraud and ordered him to repay the 2 investors. Later in March 1998, Stanley mysteriously passed away from poisoning after dining at a local restaurant. A week later, his house was burglarized and all of his experimental equipment was missing. Today, his patents have expired. His inventions are now in the public domain, available for all to use without restriction or royalty payment. Despite this, no engine or vehicle manufacturer has incorporated Stanley's work. Number 8. The Cloudbuster. This device was designed in 1953 by an Austrian psychoanalyst named Wilhelm Reich. He proposed that the device could produce rain by manipulating what he called orgone energy, or universal life force present in the atmosphere. The device consists of an array of parallel hollow metal tubes which are connected at the rear to a series of flexible metal hoses, and the open end of these hoses are placed in water. He claimed that pointing this device at a cloud would eventually cause the cloud to disperse, and that pointing it at an empty patch of sky would eventually cause a new cloud to form. He further claimed that it could also draw in clouds from great distances away. Later that year, he put the device to a test when blueberry farmers in Maine offered to pay him if he could end a drought that threatened the crop. The Weather Bureau had reportedly forecast no rain for several days when he began the experiment. He, along with 3 assistants, set up the device off the shore of Grand Lake, near Bangor Hydroelectric Dam. He operated the device for just over an hour, and according to a source in Ellsworth, the climate began changing later in the night, and then the following morning, it started raining. Witnesses stated that the clouds were very eerie, and the rain continued throughout the day. However, scientists remained skeptic about this and claimed that it was purely coincidence. In the late 1950s, Wilhelm switched his attention to UFOs, which he believed were spraying radiation in an attempt to destroy Earth. He claimed to see hostile alien spaceships hovering menacingly close to his laboratory. He and his son traveled in the deserted area of Arizona and used the device as space guns, aiming them at the sky in an attempt to drain energy. By this time, he had attracted the authorities in the area and was arrested. He received a 2-year prison sentence, and the psychiatrist at the federal prison reported that he was experiencing delusion. 8 months later, he passed away in his cell after suffering from a heart attack. The court then ordered to burn the blueprint of his device and all of his publications. Number 7. Starlight. This material was invented over 30 years ago by former hairdresser named Maurice Ward. He claimed that the material can withstand and insulate from extreme heat. He never revealed the exact components of the material, but he stated that it contains a complex polymer of 21 ingredients that can come as a liquid, paste, or solid molded into any form. Maurice never went to a university, nor had any formal scientific training. He'd once worked for a chemical company, but only as a forklift truck driver, and for the majority of his life, he'd made a living as a hairdresser in a quiet Yorkshire town. He made the discovery purely by accident, after experimenting chemicals in his workshop to develop new hair dyes. His invention attracted a lot of attention during the 90s after it made an appearance on the BBC's Tomorrow's World program. An egg was coated with starlight and then blasted with a blowtorch at 2,500 degrees Celsius. After several minutes, the surface of the egg was barely lukewarm, and the egg was totally uncooked inside. Maurice also allowed various organizations, such as the Atomic Weapons Establishment and ICI, to conduct tests on samples, but he did not permit them to retain samples for fear of reverse engineering. In lab tests, it has withstood the heat from a nuclear flash and endured temperatures 3 times hotter than the melting point of diamonds. He was bombarded with offers from companies wanting to buy Starlight, but he became more and more reluctant to let the recipe go. He refused to sell it to Boeing for less than a multi-million-dollar sum, and refused to get it patented in fear of someone stealing the recipe. Sadly, in 2011, Maurice passed away at the age of 78 without ever commercializing or patenting his revolutionary material. He once mentioned in an interview that his close family knows the fabrication process, but after his death, neither his wife nor any of his 4 daughters has produced any sample to demonstrate that they know the process. Number 6. Rife devices. In 1933, an American inventor named Royal Raymond Rife invented an audio frequency emitting device that was capable of sending frequencies into a person's body that would destroy microorganisms found to be causally associated with cancer. Rife's work was totally unlike any other work done in pursuit of a cure for cancer. He invented a microscope that was 8 times more powerful than those used by his contemporaries. Rife and his supporters claimed that each disease or condition has its own electromagnetic frequency. They also said that finding that frequency and producing an impulse of the same frequency will kill or disable diseased cells. He first experimented the device by infecting lab animals and curing them. Later, he was presented with 16 terminal cancer victims afflicted by a variety of malignancies. The team of physicians declared 14 of those 16 were clinically cured within 70 days, while the other 2 took 20 days longer. The treatments included short breaks with nutrients to promote lymphatic elimination of the destroyed microbes. In 1940, Dr. Arthur W. Yale announced that Rife had discovered a technique for curing cancer so unique and amazing that medicine was on the verge of completely eliminating the second highest cause of disease death in America. However, Rife's claims could not be independently replicated and were discredited by independent researchers during the 1950s. Rife blamed the scientific rejection of his claims on a conspiracy involving big, powerful organizations which had brainwashed and intimidated other scientists. Rife's devices are currently classified as a subset of radionics devices, which are generally viewed as pseudo-medicine by mainstream experts. Like so many alternative cancer cures, Rife's machines were discredited by industry elites. As a result, Rife machines were never put into widespread use by mainstream medicine. Number 5. Sloot Digital Coding System. In the late 1990s, a Dutch electronics technician named Jan Sloot announced the development of the Sloot Digital Coding System, a revolutionary advance in data transmission that he claimed could reduce a feature-length movie down to a file size of just 8 kilobytes. He claimed that his way was different from the conventional and ritualistic 1 and 0 combination sheets. He further stated, "It is not about compression. Everyone is mistaken about that. The principle can be compared with the concept as Adobe PostScript, where sender and receiver know what kind of data recipes can be transferred, without the data itself actually being sent." He later demonstrated his invention to a number of Philips executives, where he used an old PC and played 16 movies simultaneously from a 64 kilobyte chip at a high speed without reading from a hard drive. Strangely, after getting a bunch of investors, Jan experienced a heart attack a day before he could patent his invention, and his device was never recovered. Although it had attracted the interest of all the top investors of the industry, none was ever revealed the secret behind its functionality. Number 4. Ogle's carburetor. In the 1970s, a man named Tom Ogle developed a new type of carburetor that pressurized gasoline into a vapor and injected it into the firing chambers. He claimed that the modified carburetors can drastically increase fuel economy and allow cars to reach up to 100 miles per gallon. He demonstrated his device to the press on April 1977. He drove his 1970 Ford Galaxy 200 miles from El Paso to Deming on a measure of 2 gallons of gasoline. His car was under observation at all times, yet the vehicle went the distance without stopping for fuel and averaged 100 miles per gallon at 55 miles per hour. When inspectors checked for a hidden fuel tank, none were found, and there was no sign of fraud. Not only does his device promise more miles per gallon, but he claimed that it will clean the environment while causing its owner fewer repair headaches. He believed his system is the answer to the world's pollution problems and has demonstrated virtually zero pollutant emissions coming from his engine exhaust. He reportedly first got his idea for the carburetor when he accidentally poked a hole in the gas tank of his lawnmower. He claimed he ran a hose from the top of the tank directly into the carburetor, and the engine kept running for 96 hours. Tom used the same concept on an automobile, gathering fumes from the gas tank and piping them to the engine. He was approached by C.F. Ramsey, an international financier who wanted to buy his patent and marketing rights to the device. He signed a preliminary agreement with him the very next day and was offered $25 million. Later on August 19, 1981, Tom mysteriously passed away at the age of 26, and according to the autopsy, he overdosed on painkillers. Number 3. Greek fire. Way back in the 7th century, the Byzantine created a weapon known as Greek fire to protect Constantinople during the Arab siege. The incendiary weapon was exceptionally effective in naval warfare, as it could be shot from siphon-like devices and continued to burn even when it came in contact with water. To enhance the effect, the Byzantines installed figureheads of animals like lions on their ships, so it would seem as if the animals were spewing fire from their mouths. This potent weapon gave the Byzantines an edge over their enemies in warfare, and it also had a psychological effect on foes that had never seen such a device. The weapon provided them huge technological advantages and was responsible for many military victories. Due to its great importance, Greek fire was a closely guarded secret of the empire. No foreigner could expect to gain this knowledge from the Byzantines. Although many nations sought the secret of Greek fire in diplomatic exchanges, the Byzantines never shared this knowledge. Number 2. Chronovisor. In the 1960s, Father Pellegrino Maria Ernetti, an Italian priest, claimed to have invented a time machine of what he called chronovisor, which allowed him to see in the future and past. He described that the device looked a bit like a television. However, instead of receiving broadcasts from local transmission stations, the chronovisor could tune into the past to allow the viewer to see and hear events that had occurred years or even centuries earlier. He claimed that the machine worked by detecting all the sights and sounds that humanity had made that still floated through space. The device supposedly enabled viewers to watch any event in human history by tuning into the remnant vibrations that are caused by every action. Even though he lacked hard evidence for these claims, he said that he had witnessed, among other major historical events, such as the founding of Rome in 53 BC. On his deathbed in 1994, he said that he attended a meeting of all the people involved in the chronovisor at the Vatican, during which the only existing machine was destroyed. He stated that, in the wrong hands, it could create the most fearsome dictatorship the world has ever seen. Unsurprisingly, conspiracy theorists say that the chronovisor is still being used today and is located somewhere in the Vatican, hidden in one of the many chambers. However, others believe that this was just a complete hoax. Number 1. Project XA. In the 1960s, the Liggett and Myers Tobacco Company created a product called the XA. It was a cigarette in which most of the stick's carcinogens had been eliminated. The product was also known as the palladium cigarette, which incorporated palladium nitrate into tobacco and made combustion of the tobacco more thorough and complete, resulting in smoke containing less harmful byproducts. Despite the company's initial support, executives withdrew their backing for the project, and the palladium cigarette never got to the production stage. The company's lawyers had advised that launching a safer product would lead to endless lawsuits from the public for the less safe products that Liggett sold. After 25 years of research and development, the project was abandoned, and more than 2 decades, the public had no better knowledge of a safer product despite the work that was done. What's even worse was that they continued to sell cancer-causing cigarettes, even though they were fully aware of the health risks associated with what they sold. Another reason the palladium cigarette never made it to the shelves was because Liggett didn't want to break ranks with other tobacco giants like Philip Morris. Although the company knew that the product would be commercially viable and marketable, they were more worried about the potential retaliation from other tobacco companies in the industry. In the end, after spending an estimated $10 million on the project, Liggett buried all traces of it in the sand.